Hello and welcome to this video in which I'm going to discuss different brands of cameras other than Canon, which I know is quite rare on this channel. What camera would I be using if I couldn't use a Canon? Now, don't worry, I am not thinking of switching camera manufacturer anytime soon. This is more of a hypothetical question because I know that I talk almost exclusively about Canon cameras on this channel, but I'm not blind, I'm aware that other cameras exist. Well, first of all, I'm not going to allow myself to go with the two somewhat cheating options, which would be Red or Arri, because they're far more expensive than the C100 Mark II that I'm using, the EOS R I'm shooting on. They're full-on cinema cameras, and they're just not in the same category as what I'm using right now. So exclude both of those two cameras from this lineup. So, bearing all that in mind, there are two camera manufacturers in which I would go to, and the first one may be a bit of a surprise, but it is Blackmagic. I had a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I got that many years ago, before I got the C100 Mark II, but after I got the Canon 650D. At the time, I thought it was the best camera on offer that I could afford, and it was good, but there were some things about it that I didn't really like, which I have made a video about it before. And since then, Blackmagic have come up with a lot more cameras. They've had the whole cinema line, the production camera, the Ursa series, and there have been some issues, and by some I mean quite a lot of technical issues. But now, in the past couple of years, their cameras are looking more and more solid and more feasible for proper production use. I'm actually really impressed with the Pocket 6K. I've seen some really nice footage from that online, and for £2,500 you're really getting some very impressive specs. RAW, slow motion, 120 FPS, it's doing RAW video with the Blackmagic RAW, it can shoot ProRes, has a nice big screen on the back, brilliant codec options. I mean, obviously ProRes and RAW are outstanding, and for me, using DaVinci Resolve, the whole production to post-production workflow would be very seamless because you can edit Blackmagic RAW video directly in Resolve, so that would be really convenient. And the Ursa Mini Pro Generation 2, that's also quite an impressive camera. It's a little bit strange now that that has significantly lower resolution than the Pocket, which is the cheaper camera, but hey, it's still solid with 4.6K, it has built-in ND filters, built-in XLR ports, a somewhat similar feature set to the Canon C200. But for me, the biggest drawback of those cameras is no autofocus. Now, I am well aware of the argument that they are cinema cameras, they do not need autofocus, but the fact is, if you're going to be a single operator, you're going to put the camera on a gimbal, autofocus is really useful. And yeah, you can fit like a wireless follow focus and then operate it with one of those single wheel follow focuses, but it's just a bit annoying to do, and autofocus is good enough for most of those situations. I'm using autofocus right now on the EOS R and it's doing a really good job. There are sort of other smaller issues, just quality of life things, like the battery life on those cameras doesn't tend to be amazing, certainly not as good as the Canon cameras, and I still do have some concerns about the reliability because I have seen, even with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, things can go wrong, and I know there were some issues when the Pocket 4K came out of it, bricking within a few shots or a few minutes worth of use. But I know that Blackmagic has improved their quality control a lot, so that does give me a lot more hope in them being able to deliver a solid, reliable camera. And one of the things I do really like about the Blackmagic cameras is the price. They are very affordable. Now, bearing in mind, you do need a lot of accessories to make them work, and considering that yes, it's really cool that they're doing RAW, but you need to make sure that you have the post-production computer that's powerful enough to edit the RAW, and you need to be able to store the RAW, so you'll need a storage server or at the very least a very big RAID array. But if you can deal with those things and the sort of weird quirks and various, I don't want to say inconsistencies, but just slightly strange things with some of the Blackmagic cameras, then they could be a good option. So that is my first option, Blackmagic cameras, but mostly the Pocket Cinema 6K, the Ursa Mini Pro G2, and the little action camera, the micro cinema camera. Those would be quite nice. But as I said, there is a second option too. Now, this second option is Panasonic. Back in the time when I bought the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, that was around the sort of time that the GH4 came out, and I looked at that camera. It was very interesting, very tempting, but in the end I didn't end up going for it. I preferred the feature set of the Pocket Cinema camera. And again, when I was looking at the C100 Mark II, I think that was a similar sort of time to the GH5. Yeah, I think the GH5 came out a little bit before I bought the C100 Mark II, and again, I looked at that and I was, maybe a bit interested, but for me, the problem with those cameras has always been the lens mount, micro four thirds. I'm just not a fan of it. Now, I'm aware that there are lots of people who absolutely love micro four thirds, and that's cool, but for me, I'm just not a fan of the system. With micro four thirds, you are essentially limited to a smaller sensor. I'm not sure what the biggest sensor micro four thirds allows is, but I'm pretty sure you're never going to get a full frame sensor in a micro four thirds camera. Now, I don't mind having a bit of a crop factor, I can deal with that, but just the idea of being hardware limited to a smaller sensor, that bit really doesn't appeal to me. Now, the other thing that put me off a bit was the lens selection. Now, I'm aware that there are plenty of lenses for the micro four thirds system, but it's just not quite as cohesive, say, as the Canon EF mount. I mean, it's probably not as bad as I think it is because I don't have really any experience with it, but at least if you want to get into the Canon EF system, you could purely only buy lenses made by Canon, and you would really never run out of new lenses to buy. Whereas with the micro four thirds system, you need to get sort of a few Lumix lenses, a few Leica lenses, a few SLR Magic lenses. It's nice having the choice, but if you want to sort of stick to one ecosystem, that could be a bit difficult. And before I get lots of people saying, oh, well, you can just use your EF lenses and use an adapter, I've had some quite bad experiences in the past with a Metabone speed booster on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. It broke, so one of the pins got stuck, it scratched up the back of a lens, and that really wasn't good, especially considering the amount of money I had to spend on it. I'm just not a huge fan of third-party adapters. But all of that changes when you look at the Panasonic S1H. It's a full-frame camera. Honestly, it's a full-frame cinema mirrorless camera. The specs are incredible. Can do 6K, it's got good slow motion, good internal codecs. The footage I've seen online looks really nice. I think it has in-body image stabilization, which is also quite useful. And the big thing for me, that full-frame sensor with the L mount. Now, the L mount is completely different to micro four thirds. It's a full frame lens mounting system designed by Sigma, Leica and Panasonic, I believe. It's not quite as open as micro four thirds is, but it's not as closed off as some of the other lens mount systems. The lenses on option for the L mount look really nice, like those L mount Sumo Lux lenses. Expensive, but so nice. It also helps to convince me that the Panasonic S1H has been approved by Netflix as a content creation camera. I'm pretty sure it's the only mirrorless sort of small form factor camera that has been approved for Netflix originals. That's pretty cool. It's small, it's affordable, and like I said, the footage is really amazing. And if I needed a cinema camera and I wanted to stay in the Panasonic ecosystem, then there's always the EVA 1. Now, that camera never really interested me because I'm not sure that it offers that much over the C200 for the kind of things I'd be doing, but if you're not looking at a Canon camera or a Canon cinema camera, the EVA 1 is still a very good camera. It does have an EF mount though, so maybe in the future they're going to do a Mark II with an L mount. I personally think that they should do that, an updated EVA 1 with maybe some more advanced specs and an L mount. That could be a very compelling cinema camera, and it would work hand in hand with the S1H. So, those are my two options, Panasonic, especially the S1H, and Blackmagic. Which may leave some people thinking, well, what about Sony? Because you could definitely make an argument that they're the nearest equivalent to Canon. Very similar cameras, except you get full frame 4K for a more affordable price, and just generally all of the cameras are a bit cheaper. But the thing is, I like to make fun of Sony cameras, but they're good cameras, they really are. They just don't interest me as much. It's a bit difficult to explain, but I'm not quite as excited about the prospect of a Sony A7S Mark II as I am about the Panasonic S1H. I would be interested at some point to maybe try out some of the Sony full-frame cameras because maybe seeing the footage and using them will change my mind, but right now if you forced me to choose a camera that was similar to the EOS R, I think I'd have to go for the S1H. But all of that's purely theoretical. I don't see my Canon preference changing anytime soon. However, my YouTube channel is very close to being monetized, and presuming it does get monetized and I'm able to make a bit of money off the channel, it would be quite interesting to buy a variety of cameras, compare them from other manufacturers. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, because if I do get the opportunity to do that, I would be quite interested in making some of those sorts of videos. If you found this video useful, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing so as not to miss any new videos. See you later.